The school committee for the last 4 years has had an athletic complex on its list in capital, and in the last 2.5 years now, it's been moved forward. This past spring, the annual town meeting, through the capital line item, provided up to $20,000, as recommended by the study committee, and then prior to that, the full committee. The request of this, for these funds, was to have it professionally looked at based on concerns of fields that we are closing down, lack of irrigation, safety, etc. As you look at this from left to right, you'll see you have the high school facility, the high school itself, then the baseball field here, and then this is, for example, the Yale. This happens to be where my office is as well, and this is where currently there's a softball field here, and these are all the fields back here. This item is not currently present, and then this is what's called the pit field in the back. The idea goes through A, B, C, D, E, F1, F2, and G. So those are all the options that I'll go through. Starting tomorrow on the district website, all the pictures will be on there with all the maps that are here. Line item costs will also be provided. Currently, you'll see the big costs as it pertains to each of the sections, and what this all means. In option A, you can read these by looking at the bottom right-hand corner, CO1A. In option A, there's a handout that I provided to you earlier. You'll see the track and field reconstruction at the Norton High School. That is not a turf field. The synthetic turf field would happen here in this area, behind the Yale School, with a baseball field, a softball field, and multi-purposes fields, tennis courts, and then the pit, what's known as the pit field in the bottom right, over by Seminary Way. I just had some questions about that earlier tonight. There's an amenities building as part of this. Some additional amenities here as well with the current situation, and then there's also the potential for the tennis courts and parking that takes place here, and it's all interconnected. The pit field on the bottom right is also a synthetic field, so it's synthetic right to left, and then natural. Softball is natural, and this would just be a reconstruction of natural. And the cost is $9.3 million as a cost estimate. You'll see the breakdowns again tomorrow. All of these will have separate line items for each as well. In option B, the only change from A to B is the reconfiguration of the baseball field. Instead of going from the parking lot, and it changes the parking lot reconfiguration. Instead of the field going from here this way, it goes the other way. There's some concerns about doing that because of lighting. But it doesn't really change much of anything else. In general, there's still the amenities building, the tennis courts, the additional parking as part of that. And that is a $9.2 million to 9.3, you could say, right on that one, option. When this first started to be looked at, we started to take a look at how do we break this up into something that's more of a long-term solution. So what started to happen is in option C, we proposed that the senior center be housed on where the baseball field is right now. So that's the major change. You have a synthetic field here instead of natural, redoing of the 6-lane current. The baseball field is gone. It actually gets moved to the pit field, with a secondary field in the back as well, or a multi-purpose field. None of this changes except that the tennis courts are now closer. We put this forward to the permanent building committee via the chair, and I believe it's what I would call dead on arrival. Differences of opinion about connecting seniors and students, concerns about traffic, concerns about safety. Those are the issues. I can't speak for the senior center, but I know that they had some concerns about privacy. Our proposal was grounded on what happened in Plymouth, where the high school is literally less than 50 yards from the senior center, and in one of my colleagues in another district in Swampscott actually has the senior center inside the actual high school. But I don't think that this is any longer an option just because of concerns that have been brought up by the senior center. And again, they have to do what's best for them in terms of their priorities altogether. This cost was a $10 million cost because you're redoing other fields as well. As a senior/community center, that was put on the table, and I haven't attended the permanent building committee meetings, but based on those who have attended, I've been told that it's probably not an option. So we moved at the same time to option D, right here. And what you have in option D on your handy is a redoing of the track to an 8-lane track from 6. Synthetic field construction at the high school, so that's all here. Synthetic fields design as per the original. Amenities building, tennis courts, additional parking, which is here, and natural grass pit field. So this is not, in option D, this is not a turf field. So that brings the cost slightly down from the 1 or 2 that you've seen before. We started to dabble around why having tennis courts and not having tennis courts. Again, in this scenario, the baseball field is kept as a natural field. Softball field is still natural, and the pit field is natural. Tennis courts were to stay, and we started to take a look at amenities buildings. Do we really need them, and so on and so forth. So the school committee at that point gave it back to the study committee to look at potential other options. So we go to, this was the cost for D, $9.5 million. Gale Associates is, if not the #1 firm, 1 or 2 firms in the state that do most of these, or many of these I should say. So this is based upon their, how they see the cost. I do know that their projects have been underfunded or under budget in other districts, most recently in Hopkinton. So in option D, the configuration, option E, the configuration is that we still have an 8-lane track with a turf field, with lights, etc. Added to that in option E is the synthetic field in the area back here, but as you can see, everything else is gone. This is just kept up to us, if you will. There are no tennis courts here. We'd have to take a look at our tennis courts at the middle school. The baseball field is natural. There is no amenities building. There's no extra walkway per se, except for the ones that are already in place and the ones that will be part of the project. There's no extra parking involved with this, and this comes in at $7.2 million. And again, the high school gets done and all the synthetic fields get done except for the pit field, which does not get done. The next option was what's called F1 and F2. F1 and the change is minimal, except for cost, of course. F1 is an 8-lane track at the high school again. And the baseball field actually gets turned into a synthetic field with a multi-purpose field. And this continues, but the tennis courts are back. Again, amenities buildings and all that stuff are off the list. And this field here is called the pit field over by Seminary. And just for clarity, in my passing, I was told that I commented that potentially, we were looking to open Seminary Way for the school department. We are not. What we proposed was this: if this became the senior center here, then the senior center building committee would have to look at things like Seminary Way or out to, I believe, it's Sumner, S-U-M-M-E-R, thank you. Because I couldn't provide access back into the driveway, just because it's already tight as it is. But it does provide, if this were to be a senior center, access coming out to Summer or a Seminary, which is not popular, I understand that, but again, that's not my decision, that's someone else's decision. But for the school department's purposes, we are not looking at Seminary Way in any way, shape, or form. So this comes with tennis courts with no lights, and the other area here is that this is also not lit up. So you're going to have the high school with lighting and all of this with lighting, but no tennis courts and no baseball field with lighting. And so that comes in, because of the lights, at $9.2 million. Again, you're adding another synthetic field. And the difference between F1 and F2 is simply, we take the same design and we just add the lights to the tennis courts and to the baseball field, and it comes in at the highest, it comes in at the highest cost of $10.4 million. So that's the difference between F1 and F2, is lighting. And so the last option that got put before you was option G. So now I'll talk about process in a moment, but option G is in fact the 8-lane with the turf field, natural softball, natural, they're not part of the project at all. Then you have the turf field going left to right, as before, the tennis courts, and then there is in fact a pit field that comes into play here with no lights. So this is all lit going this way, but this pit field in the back doesn't have lighting at all. The tennis courts also doesn't have lighting in this situation. The difference between this and the prior ones, F1 and F2, is the baseball field becoming turf. That's really the big. There are no amenities buildings, there's no extra parking here. We believe that, especially for afternoons and into the evening, that the amount of parking here after school is out is fine. And we also pick up some parking here at the end of school and potentially back here at the end of school, where most of these fields will be in use by both high school and middle school, and to a certain extent, young students and then community. And that comes in at a cost of $8.667499. The potential here also is, again, that the pit field here could also still be up in the air, or something that's discussed later with the town if there's any interest. Again, if there's any interest. Tonight's the second night of forums. Tomorrow, about midday, early afternoon, our website, which is www.nortonk12.ma.us, under this section called Community, there's already a link there that will go live called Athletic Complex. That will have an opportunity, all the pictures will be in there, all these maps will be in there, and a line item budget is included in there. So you not only get this, but for every single one of these, you get the specific line item insurance in terms of liability, in terms of the project contingency, so on and so forth. We do know that this year alone, this past school year, we've already had to move 18 games off the football field because of the wear and tear. It's a natural grass field. It doesn't have very good, if you will, management of water and so on and so forth. This project currently does not include solar, but that's a discussion to have as part of lighting, is how do we take us off the grid. And then there's the big picture, which is besides the taxpayers making a decision, because that's who it belongs to in the town meeting, then the next question would be, is there a potential for revenue? So what we've been doing is speaking to school districts that in most cases have 1 or 2 fields at a complex, or are working. For example, Bellingham is working on fields 2 and 3 as we speak in terms of going to the town. They already have one. And the rising cost of this fields, as you probably know, is pretty significant over the last few years. The second part is how much money can you bring in? That's a question I get all the time. And that's going to flow anywhere from, in general, the minimum of $150 to $300 an hour. We know that it's out there. We also know, as much as some folks don't like it because I'm not the economic development person, with these types of things comes revenue in terms of restaurants, in terms of gas stations, in terms of all of that stuff. I can speak to a community where, in Stoughton, where the Dana Barrows just took over the Ford dealership and made it into an indoor basketball complex, and between Easton 138 and Stoughton 138 going into Canton, anytime after 4 o'clock on weekends, you can't find a place, which is a good thing for revenue in so many ways. We also know that private organizations are the ones that are going to be interested in this. So these are going to be, organizations that can afford to pay from other communities. We've been asked about where those funds would go, and our recommendations, they go to a line item within the revolving account. Facilities, the school committee is considered not charging local youth groups for this purpose. The school committee is also considering that those line items help to offset the cost of athletics, because as some of you know, or if not many of you know, we have the highest fees for athletics. Can we cap those in some way, shape, or form, or at least try to freeze them and bring them back to something more reasonable than $350 per sport with no caps? The other part that's important is that as a process, the school committee may, at G, the field committee is meeting next week. The school committee meeting next week as well. There's also a joint meeting, so I'm not sure that there will be a lot of discussion on this, but the school committee will take this up in January. We continue to give information out to folks that are asking for it. I think starting tomorrow we'll get ideas from folks, people that might be just totally against it, or people might say, well, have you thought about doing this instead of doing that? So that's kind of the big picture of it all. The consensus, I would say, from the committee right now is looking at G as this last one, both committees, because it brings in a little bit of, if you will, of a compromise. We've taken care of questions that have come up about bathroom access. That would be at an operating cost to us, because we do not want to build bathrooms. The cost just jumps through the roof in terms of connecting, but also the other part of it is serious concern for safety, besides just having portables. Of course, ADA compliant, but not physical bathrooms that we would have to plumb and be concerned about issues like liability. In terms of the uses of the fields, because of lighting and so on and so forth, the cost absorbed by an outside group would also have to include any type of an opening of a building. That's a contractual obligation that I have as well to the custodians. But in some cases, it's more hiring of one of them at the cost of who's using it for the purposes of safety, making sure that there's somebody in the area that knows all of the needs of what the options are in terms of safety, of somebody getting hurt, or somebody needing support besides just 911. When it comes to our high school program, we have an athletic trainer that works with our student population and has the AED capabilities and all of that. When it comes to our middle school students, we currently don't, and we do have a full athletic program at the middle school, which is 100% paid for by parents, no operational money. That's 100% user fee in fundraising. So that's the general gist. And I think I said something, I just got approached about Seminary Way. Seminary Way does not involve the school department. It simply means if there was an access road that was needed for another building, but we're not building anything down that way. And again, I don't know what the final decision from the permanent building committee is going to be in terms of the senior center and a town hall. I think that potentially this spring we're going to hear more about that. I'll defer to the school committee members that are here for more information. But that's, I know that I think they're meeting tonight as well.
Yeah, right.
So I'm sure that they're getting architectural designs and ideas and all like we've done in this process, but it's a significantly more significant planning process than this is, and also undertaking public land versus private land and purchasing and all of that. Again, they have to go through that process. Questions, thoughts, ideas, concerns, problems? So for us, and for us I mean the schools, one of the things that comes up all the time is the issue of why do we need the fields? So let me get a little bit into that with some specifics. If you take a look at this area, and please walk it, if you take a look at this area back here, which is used as practice fields here, softball field here, baseball field, and then this is nothing here, and then the pit. This field is completely watered out. Like right now, if we were down there, I know it's the winter, so it's different, but it's completely gone. Once it starts to rain, it's unusable. So there'd be some turf field work there. We cannot water any of this area here because we do not have irrigation connected to any of this. We only have irrigation here. And the problem that we have is that this is all in a site in areas where stumps were all literally through time buried. So what we're having is we have the hill slopes that are taking place, and it's a lot more costly to make that into a national field than it would be to a turf field just because of the amount of work that we would have to do, and we still don't know what that impact is, although it's projected. When it comes to our baseball field, it's in what we would call at least good shape, and softball. When it comes to baseball and softball, there is controversy around the idea of turf and using turf. But what we've created here, for example, is instead of rescheduling games, is the potential that if it rains, we're just playing our game here on the turf field, because that is a regulation baseball field. Same thing with softball, because it gives us the flexibility. It also gives us the flexibilities to play all games at home, so we could have varsity here, JV here. That actually has a potential savings on schedules in terms of traveling, because now maybe I'm only traveling with 2 teams on 1 bus. Trying to think, the original tennis courts here. This all has to do in conjunction that we know we need to redo our tennis courts. And then we're trying to utilize the maximum feasible space, because as you know, as we get here, we get this 25-foot marker with wetlands and so on. And of course, that would have to go through that process as well in terms of Conservation Commission and all of that planning. Once the process is underway, this all goes out to bid. So just like you did for your high school, just like you've done for windows, the roofs, anything on the school side, and you're going to do on the town side, you have a projected amount done by professionals, and then you go out to bid, and somebody wins the bid based upon coming in or at, under, or above what you originally proposed. In most cases, these companies, like Gale, are very conservative. You'll see in the line item contingencies as part of this proposal, which I think is the only way that you really can move forward, is to have contingencies. But again, what does this mean in terms of how many projects are out there? What are the companies looking to do? Is this a type of a project that would be something that actually leads to a lot of competition, because it is a complex? And so there's that drive costs actually down and not up. Again, we can't really project that at this time, but again, economics will tell you that we believe that there's some game to be played here when it comes to going out for the bid, if and when we get to that process. Down here are all of them. Tomorrow, live on the website, so you can have, and they'll be in this color, they'll look in this format, so they look a little bit better than that. And if you can, you'll see the one pager like you have, plus you'll see the target line items, and then underneath each, it's almost every page is reflective of what that target line item means. And that allows for folks in the public to make further commentary. I have been asked about what does this mean for the permanent building committee in terms of the senior center and the town hall. That's not my decision. This was a capital item plan that's been on the school system for 4 years. Last year, 2 years ago, it started to move. This past, it would have been due in December for the May town meeting. Our capital plan received support from the then members of that committee. We've lost a few, but the then members asked for us to get a quote, like we have to for all capital items. We contacted 4 companies. 1 company said this would be our quote, $19,000 and change. We requested those funds. It's under $50,000. We met the requirement of trying to get 3 quotes by getting the phone calls and requesting for information. Nobody else responded. Who knows how many companies would respond once we go out for the actual bid itself. We just don't know. Yes, sir.
Would it be helpful to talk about the financial condition of the town? I mean, we have a budget of about $60 million, and it's about $15 million of that shared expenses, fixed costs that everybody, all the departments share. It's about $44 million. And the budget shows that 44 million of school already gets 70% of that. 30% goes for everything else. And we're already continuing to pay for this restoration of this building, paying for the, as you mentioned, the roof that they have in schools, some in school.
No, it's the JCS from an MSBA project in 2013.
And we're about to be paying, as I understand, windows that have been in that building, that's several $1 million. And I'm wondering if this is the right time. This town is way below the recommended number for industry revenue coming in. Most of it is residential. And I know people are working on that, but we're a ways away from that. And you cannot run a town on strictly residential tax, if you know that. And trying to get a senior center at town hall, but both of those buildings probably should be condemned. I know that, I'm pretty sure the town hall would not pass inspection. And the OSHA inspection didn't go well, and the town, it should be demolished. And the senior center is not only inadequate, it also is in terrible repair. These should have been built years ago, these two buildings. And they're still, and now this is potentially being added on to them. That just seems like a rather significant burden, additional burden to the town, tax-wise. And I'm wondering, is this the right time? I mean, you look at it and say, wow, that's pretty nice. And I'm sure from the school standpoint, from the athletes' standpoint, that it would be great, all these kinds of things. I mean, I grew up in Pittsfield, and we did not have an athletic complex. Big town, big city, big town. We had to run, for instance, in the track team, but we had to run about a mile and a half, 2 miles to a park to work it. Baseball team had to do the same, football team. And somehow we came out with championship teams. And somehow Norton comes out with championship teams as well. So I'm wondering if this is the right timing. We're talking about adding another 8, 9, 10 plus million onto the town hall and the senior center came in around 20 plus million. That's something like a 50% added onto this. Is this the right timing? And I'm also wondering, could this be done in smaller bites? Where, okay, renovate the football field, and then another time do this, another time do that. To me, what I've heard, sometimes you have to use the weed fields. I'm thinking, kind of a blessing to the time that they're here, that those fields are available, for games connection plan those fields. What's wrong with that? From my perspective, anyway. And what about some level of fundraising that could go on in town, where people who are really interested in wanting to do this and help out with make some donations and some fundraising to go along with it. So is this really the right timing for this?
Well,
Given the financial condition of the town, it doesn't seem like
sure.
like a good time.
So let me try to address a couple of those. We may not agree with them, but let me just give you some of my facts from that I think maybe we could agree on. Norton High School as a renovation addition project was 54 cents on the dollar. Probably wouldn't have gone forward if you didn't get 54 cents on the dollar from the state. So you had to make a decision at that point. Do you accept 54 cents on the dollar or you don't? Because it would have cost you a lot more. I think you know that. JCS roof, 52 cents on the dollar. The window project at the 3 elementary schools, considered the worst windows, top 10 worst windows in public schools in Massachusetts. That's the only reason. We put an SLI statement for those 3 buildings thinking that we were 3 to 5 years out, and we went right to the top. Not based on our information, based on 2 site visits by MSBA, looking at the windows, the water coming in, the loss of heat, and so on and so forth. $8.4 million project, 52 and a half coming back. The project going to come in under $5 million to the town, or actually under like 4.4, I think is going to be the number. We'll know in the next month and a half or 2. And that potentially includes a special situation that we had to remediate at the Yale School as well, as part of that project. I don't think any of those projects could have potentially been done if there wasn't matching. This is the first project that we are coming forward with, recognizing that the need, and again, to your question, I'm not suggesting that the school committee, the board of selectmen, the permanent building committee, and then the taxpayers can't take any of this and say, we're only going to do the high school. Those are decisions that my job was to say, what are the needs as part of the plan? It was, at the time, Chairwoman Cohen from the school committee and Chairman of the board of selectmen, Bob Kimball, who said, let's put the $20,000 forward and take a look and see what this looks like. So our job was to do exactly what the permanent building committee is doing for the senior center and the town hall, which is it a 2-story building? Where does it go? Do you have to buy a site and have it for free? It's actually one of the reasons why there are 2 sites on school property costing no money to the permanent building committee. I don't think they're going to happen for the right reasons, according to the permanent building committee and the senior center, but that's their decision, not mine. We may be potentially buying sites for any of those two. That's a decision that someone's making above my pay grade. This came down to a concern about, and you say, about operating. We just don't go to Wheaton. We have to pay Wheaton. We just don't go down the street to the Fittenberg. We have to pay the Y. So I have a recurring operational cost in a fixed budget, as you know. I will tell you that if we do math, it's not a 70-30 split. It's not. It's something I've been arguing with the finance committee and with the town side since I've been here. This past year was after the fall town meeting where we took money in the fall town meeting. It got closer to that 70-30. You also have to recognize that I'm 3 times the size of employees of the town, at least 3 times the size of the number of employees that I carry on a day-to-day, not including substitutes that have to come in for medical leaves, maternity leaves, health concerns and all of that are significantly higher and not budgeted differently or later because you have to pay for them. They're budgeted out of my operating budget. I was asked this year about the transfer of funds. We transferred within our budget, not to FinCom, but within our budget at the end of the year, $169,000 in personnel in order to pay expenses. We can go back to the town for it. A couple of years ago, we were unfortunate. We had 8 students move in at a significant cost of over $100,000 apiece. We did go back to town meeting for those. So I think to answer your question in general, as you're well aware, these 3 projects, 1 project, just the senior center, just the town hall, whatever it's going to be, is a debt exclusion. It's going to be paid out over a certain period of time. I think what you're speaking to is the bigger picture of operation. I haven't heard yet, and I'm not here to criticize, but I haven't heard that we're going to build a senior center without increasing staffing and costs. I haven't heard that yet. I just haven't. But I do know that the 39,000 square feet that we added to this building, I had to hire another custodian at $33,000 a year, or else I had to pay overtime. And I made a decision my first year here as superintendent, through the school committee support, that if you add 39,000 square feet of brand new building, you better make sure for 20 years that the taxpayer, if not 50 years, that the taxpayer sees that the place is still where it should be. So I think when you look at budgets like we do, like you do, I think you have to take a look at the long term. You made a comment earlier, and I'm not trying to attack, so please don't be concerned. You have a right to your opinion. What is the cost today of not building a senior center that should have been built 20 years ago? I can tell you that the high school project would cost you somewhere between $9 and $12 million more today, based upon what I'm seeing for increases in labor costs and materials. Never mind the spike that you see with things like metals. I live in a community that just built a $123 million brand new high school. I live next to a community that's about to go out. We have one down the street here that's $250 million. But they're getting money back. So I don't think it's comparable to say that when you have 54 cents on the dollar available to you, that you can just say no to it and not consider a $35 million project like you did here. I think the other part of it is, I can only speak for myself and not the school committee. I'm the one who proposed the senior center on the baseball field. And I did, solely because I believe there's a significant disconnect between students and seniors in this town with a growing population. There's a tremendous benefit. My kids aren't thugs. They're good kids, damn good kids. And they work well with seniors, and they do that now. Imagine if we're just a short walk away from each other. In Swampscott, we have elderly people going into the school during the day and taking a class. That's happened in the past. So we built this, we changed where we were putting, for example, just as an example, bear with me, where we said, let's put the senior center here. Isn't it interesting that at the same time, we also moved the tennis courts? Because we knew that this was a benefit? Because we know it's a benefit today? So yes, I'm an idealist. I am. I think you know that. My job is to take $20,000 received by the study committee and to put as many options on the table for that committee, then the school committee, then the board of selectmen, then the finance committee, or the finance committee, then the board of selectmen, then the town meeting, and then the voters to decide yea or nay. I don't know if it's 3 questions, I don't know if it's 1 question. I don't know, to your question, if we just say, you know what, let's scrap this and let's just go with this, or just this, or we're not doing anything. We know that, like other communities, our biggest issue that we have is that this is not like it is, for example, behind our middle school, where our parent organization down there is putting in $50,000 a year of their own raised money. And we think there's some financial benefits to this in terms of long-term planning. And lastly, since the elephant's in the room, as I always say, you know, the idea of expenses is simply defined as pay now or pay later. Town hall, senior center is a perfect example. Pay now, pay later, you're going to pay. And unfortunately, and I support, I'm not a resident of your community, but I think you're absolutely 100% right that you need a town hall and a senior center. There's no doubt. How the politics of that plays, it's not my pay grade to decide. I've taken a study, we received the money, we've proposed ideas. I can go back tomorrow morning and ask for the same amount of money, not an extra, can you do H for me? Because a few people want to see H. We can do that. Public comment, negative or positive. Walk it. Walk the football field. Walk the back of the building and see how bad. I mean, I know now is the winter time, so I don't want to, overly emphasize that now. But I know my football coach who's here and is a resident of the town as well. I mean, they're moving every other day just to practice. Moving goalposts every other day just to practice, so that we don't practice on the football field, because we destroy it even worse than it is. And at the same time, I have a responsibility to Title IX. I got to be really careful about my boys soccer team not having more games than my girls soccer team over time, and sending my girls soccer team to play away every day or to play on a field that's not there. And that's part of my athletic director's responsibility and my high school principal's responsibility. And we do get complaints about where the kids play.
Just comment on this particular drawing where you locate the senior center. You probably know the senior center does more than just senior activities. It includes people who need help with the boil. It includes proposed senior center would be the food pantry, for instance. So an issue of confidentiality is a very big one. The people who come in here do not have to worry about who sees them or who doesn't see them. That is one very large issue. The second one is the traffic. I mean, particularly at the time of kids coming in and then kids leaving. I mean, it's just one big backup stream of traffic. And I don't know what the solution to that is, but I suspect that some of the seniors would be put off. So that might come up.
Yeah.
And the further you call it the pit, that's what it's called. Probably actually call it that because it's water. So it doesn't seem like a very attractive place to put anything.
Well, we would disagree on this because our plan calls for it to be built on and to be brought up to the status it would be. So I'm going to guess that any building committee is doing that for any project as well.
Another issue here, I'm sure you've done some study of these artificial fields are made from bits of rubber, is that correct?
Depends on there's about 3 or 4 different types. So
there is a danger of toxic materials coming from that, from the water that runs off, number one. That's a real concern. Another one is higher potential, if the stuff settles, there's a higher potential for concussions. It can become a very, very hard surface. And that happens. In fact, the professional fields, they have guys who go out there and do some kind of impact test on the field before they play a game on it. And they apparently are able to restore it somehow. There is a problem.
Listen, I can't.
And then you got another issue too with some fields. Typically in sports, you're going to get sweat, maybe blood that goes on the field, and this is a place for that to absorb and you get the bacteria and problems with that stuff.
So a couple of different things. I mean, at the end of the day, trying to sway individual folks' opinions about comments like that is not something that I have the professional knowledge to. I will tell you that we're at over 130 30 fields in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, high schools and complexes. So I can't imagine that all of those communities are different than we are. I do know that when it comes to blood and stuff like that, it is a cleanup process that you have to do. I also know that we have pretty significant issues about any type of bloodborne on student athletes having to come off the game, changing uniforms even before they can go back. So, you know, when you look at all of this, these are all discussions and debates, I guess, that we could have. I will go back to your original comment, if I may, where you noted the issue of confidentiality. I do think that's an issue. There's no doubt. And I've supported the senior center director in those statements, understanding that, in fact, confidentiality is something that's important. But with a growing senior population, as I'm always reminded to talk about, there's going to have to be more people doing the job. And I don't know what the long-term implications are, but the idea of, for example, in many communities, the HR office and the senior are actually not together. They're apart for those very reasons. I'm going to guess that people that aren't senior citizens visiting the senior center already having their confidentiality broken in some way because there's already people there. Unless they're only doing it after hours. I don't know. I don't know how that runs. But like I said before, that's a decision of the senior center based upon those topics that belongs to them. It doesn't belong to me. And I'm fine with that. But educationally, as the superintendent of schools, I see some strong possibilities. You don't have to agree with me on it. But I do think that things like confidentiality, traffic, and all those types of things. I just earlier today was asked by the folks that are on Seminary Way that I had suggested that the school department was going to open up Seminary Way. I didn't suggest that. What I suggested was that, well, that wasn't my rationale. I was suggesting that if that was a senior center, I was asked, where's the exit? And I said, well, Seminary Way or out to Summer. We have no desire to go out Seminary Way or Summer for the school department meetings because we believe we have enough parking. It's a small walk. Kids do it now. Parents do it now to get to a field to watch a game. Yes?
I just want to add a comment too. So we had the same conversation at the Board of Selectmen meeting about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, for us in respect to confidentiality. So you mentioned the food pantry. Everybody keeps talking about the food pantry. The food pantry now is not with the senior center, it's with the town hall. So if this were an option that we selected or that we wanted to consider, we have some mitigation techniques that we can put in place for confidentiality. One being that food pantry doesn't get included in this and it stays with the town hall at a different location. So, I don't mean to correct you, but I know you made a comment about this being an option that's dead on arrival. That's not the case. The Permanent Building Committee was put together by the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee, and they are charged with coming to us with options, and the Board of Selectmen will set the priorities in this town. And if we deem that this is an option that the community should be able to vote on and consider, then we will push it forward as such. But certainly, the purpose of this session is to understand everybody's opinion, to see are there ideas out there that we can take back to make this project better. So I encourage everybody to continue doing that, talking to the school committee specifically or Dr. Bayetta, however it may be. But I did want to clarify that. And I also want to clarify too that, I've said from the beginning, at least, as I've been on the Board of Selectmen, the town hall needs to be replaced. Like if there's anything that doesn't happen in this town, I think that needs to happen. We have a building where people are sitting and there's mold in the building, but I want to clarify that while the evaluation happened, we have not received the final report, so there should be no speculation about what the condition is in that building until we actually receive the facts.
Yep. Just reminded also that, again, the options for others in terms of the senior center, I'm not sure town hall is an option, includes, to your point, both this scenario and also the scenario at the pit field, which could potentially have its own exit and entranceway. One of the scenarios there, to your comment about traffic, is that it pulls the traffic out to Summer, onto 140, therefore taking folks from that area if it was to, for example, go that way. Again, these are all decisions that are down the road and not today's decisions. I think just lastly, if there's any other comments, suggestions, concerns, yes?
Can I talk to the safety?
Sure. Just introduce yourself.
Jim Arts, resident and coach, and to speak if you're talking about the safety of it, I'd agree with you if the field was a pristine grass field. There was actually grass on. It is a much softer surface. But if you've not walked the practice facilities or even the game field, that's not what we play on. There's sections of grass on the game field that has been much improved over last year because of the weather and the fact that they paid to send lacrosse and not use that field at all last year with hopes of revitalizing it. If the lacrosse team comes back this spring, the use of that field will take much more upkeep to try to get it back into that original state. And if it rains at all, it's no-go because you're going to just absolutely destroy the field. And if you destroy the field, then the amount of upkeep that has to come back in, poured into it again to try to get it back makes it much more difficult. So the viability of the turf helps us use it as a game facility, practice facility, because right now there's no lighted practice facility. And football being the fall sport, we go latest into Thanksgiving, so we'll get into a spot where practice, if we don't have lights, the place we have to go is the game field. Well, now you run into the problem of, if you practice on the game field, you're destroying the field that you're going to play on. So now, again, the upkeep comes into. So we did use Wheaton twice this year, that they don't say, oh, Norton, let's take care of you guys. It's, okay, our rate's $150 an hour, and that includes the turf and the lights. And then we got to get in there and get out, and they're charging us for the field use, which for 2 days was $700 that was footed by the athletic department and the football boosters who threw money to help offset that. And, you know, $150 an hour is not something that we can do all of the time. It was a benefit for us because we had Thanksgiving, the light, we could go out and practice from 3:30 to 5:30, which I can't do otherwise if we're here because there's no lighted practice facility. Is it? No, well, we have to carpool and get the risk of now taking kids over there with coaches, you know, bring them. Yeah.
So, superintendent didn't know that one. Bad idea. We also know that if, in fact, there is a benefit, there's the opposite. There's the opposite. And the opposite would be 8-lane track could be used by Wheaton. Baseball field turf could be used by Wheaton because they only have a national baseball. So there's the potential that we could become more of a site to support each other, if you will, as a community than just an operational cost to us. Yes, sir.
So I don't know if you covered this before I walked in, but are there revenue opportunities if you have an 8-lane track as opposed to state meet?
Yeah, so there's definitely revenue. The biggest question that comes from revenue is you want to count on your private organizations, not necessarily an MIAA state meet, because as we all know, the MIAA is in its own self, its own bank that doesn't really like to give away its funds, but it does bring in financial support. It covers at minimal for those type of situations, expenses and a little bit more. But when you're looking at your club soccer teams, your club lacrosse teams, and you're dishing out thousands of dollars a day to use a facility, that's a revenue source. And like I said, the intent of that is to help offset any type of expenses that go with something like this. Again, there's always going to be upkeep. I just spoke to the former AD here, who's at Savarian Brothers, where they have multiple fields, and his number one purchase is he had to get the big broom machine that at the end of every few weeks you take it through in order to keep up the actual field itself. That's about it. Yes, sir.
My name is Mark Artavianelli. I live on 3 Holly Street here in Norton, so I'm a town resident, but I'm also the athletic director for the town public school system. And we have 2 turf fields right now. And the most important thing is keeping our students on campus. That's what you want to do. You want to keep your kids on campus after school in the afternoon. Baseball, we just put in a $1.75 million turf baseball field, but it's used as a multi-purpose field. We had 4 baseball teams, because we have 8th grade at the high school, so we have 2 freshman teams, a JV team, and a varsity team. All 4 were able to start practice, March 16th, 17th, and we played outside. Everybody was on campus. Softball used it. Lacrosse uses the turf fields in the spring. In the fall, we had field hockey, boys and girls soccer, football. There's a number, the most important thing for us, and I think as residents, we want our kids on campus in the afternoon at a good time so they can get home at a reasonable hour, 6:30, instead of juggling your practices, having practices at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and later, like we have to do in the winter, and they get home at a decent hour. It just helps the whole atmosphere of the community. I'm more than willing to, as a resident, I think, when I get up in the morning and go for a run I live off in North Worcester, and you see the cars flying by 5 o'clock in the morning, and they're zooming by you, because everybody's going to 95. They go to the train station in Mansfield, and they go in 95 into Boston. Boston public housing the housing in the city of Boston is getting very high. If you go down that 95 corridor, 495 corridor, Franklin's filling up, Mansfield's filling up, Foxborough's filling up. It's coming down into this town. So you have to look at it not only as short term, but also long term. What's going to happen in 10, 15, 20 years? And where's the town going? And how is it going to change depending on all those situations? Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so research, provide information. I think most of you know that criticism is fine. Support is also fine too. And if you want to spend some more time with me, this is a bad time of year now, of course, to walk our practice fields and our facilities because of the weather, but feel free to do so. Talk to some folks that have been using them. We think that there's a potential. This is what's going to go on live tomorrow, so right now it's not, but you'll have a report of the school committee, which is basically the handout that you have, and then the feedback and information. And on there will be the pictures, and then you can go see the financials, big financials and line item financials. And those will be made available also to the joint board of the school committee's finance committee and select next week, next Tuesday, I believe is that meeting. But they'll be on our website, they'll be there, and that's about it. Peter.
I support the athletic field because Peter J. Reagan, Army Mayor Norton, and the voice of the Lancers, and I'm all for brand new athletic fields because people are going to use them for years to come, and I do keep all the games, and hopefully it's going to be a good project, and we need the field, the senior center, and the town hall, and we need to work together as one community and work together and move this town forward. Thank you very much.
I don't think anyone could have said it better. Have a good night. Thank you.